Hey everyone, Mac Gardner here, author of Motivate Your Money. I am joined today by the one, the only Shana Orczyk Sissel, CEO of Banríon Capital Management. Shana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Shana, you are leading the way in a space that I think more people need to be aware of when it comes to alternative investments. I'd love for you to take a few minutes to just tell the audience your story, your firm story, and then we can jump into the top three motivational money messages.
Sure. So I would say my story is I got exposed for the first time to the world of alternative investments in 2007 when I was working for Russell Investments hedge fund. That was my first time ever being associated with, doing work on hedge funds in particular, also some private equity. And that kind of opened my eyes to a world of investments that I had never really knew existed other than in the, Hollywood headline sense of, the stereotypes to rich hedge fund guy, making all his money by taking advantage of other
We've seen those.
Yeah, so that was my impression, and learning that it's nothing like that and that there's actual advantages to investing in alternative types of vehicles was something that really changed my life. And so from that point on, I became really passionate about telling people about the benefits of investing in alternatives. And that also happened to be at the time that the SEC changed the rules for 40 Act products that allowed for the proliferation of hedge fund-like and private equity-like investments vehicles being available to everybody. So it wasn't the best timing. While those vehicles did really well during the financial crisis, people didn't really take notice of them until after they did really well, because the nature of individual investors is to look at what did well in the past, some performance chasing.
The Callan chart, the quilt. What did well last year? Okay, probably won't do well.
Yeah. Exactly. So they performance chased a little bit. They went into these products. These products by nature are uncorrelated and often provide downside protection. And then we went into a raging bull market. And so there was this boom and bust within the products because people were chasing returns and not using them in the manner that would be most effective. And that really developed my passion for alternatives for all. Yeah. And that's become more mainstream. We've seen more and more access platforms, more and more crowdfunding vehicles making these types of investments available to everyone, but it hasn't actually addressed the problem, which is the general lack of education on how these products work, how they should be used. And so while people will dabble in them because they don't understand them, they get disappointed because there's no real return expectations that are aligned. So they haven't really taken hold. But in the last 18 months, they've done really, really well. People are taking notice again. And now there's more resources out there to find these vehicles, invest in these vehicles, but there's still a lack of education. So part of why I started Banríon was to help educate people on how to properly use alternatives, how they work, and also to help advisors really scale it in their book of business, and to help asset managers better understand how alternatives work for advisors so that when they go and want to work with advisors, they can properly service and support the advisor model.
In that space. Yeah. I think two of the things that resonated from what you just shared with me, with us, is education and technology, which we are huge fans of. And so from an education perspective, I like to ask leaders of our industry this important question, which is, what are your top three motivational money messages? Because we're in an industry that deals with finances and educating people about money and how to deal with money. So I joke around and say there's a top three for sodas, there's a top three for cereals, a top three for cars. So what would love to hear from you, Shana, is as you walked your journey, as you've been in this industry, as you help people when it comes to dealing with their money, what are your top three motivational money messages?
Well, first is education. I mean, I've said that a bunch of times already, but financial literacy is so important. And even people you would believe are financially literate, you know, a lot of people, oh, they have a financial advisor, oh, they have some money, they must understand the markets, they must understand the conditions. They don't. You know, I will candidly say there are a lot of advisors that don't necessarily understand the broader financial markets. They understand planning, they understand how to guide people, but they don't necessarily have the ability or the desire to communicate the nuances of individual markets and complex products. So education is first. There are no stupid questions. You would be surprised how many people ask very basic questions when it comes to finance, and you should be able to do that. A friend of mine, Dr. David Roney, on Twitter will ask quote unquote stupid questions because he is asking the questions that he knows people have.
People want to know. Yeah.
And he'll get a couple of people saying, oh, that's a stupid question. But more times than not, the vast majority will help him understand and answer those questions. So don't be afraid. You know, at Banríon, we started a series called You're Doing It All Wrong. These are 5 to 7 minutes.
I love that name. That is awesome.
I can't take credit for it. A friend of mine came up with it. I'm not that creative, but I think it's awesome. But they're 5 to 7 minute videos where we take on a myth or misconception related to the alternative investment world, because there's a lack of education. And some of what we take on is really basic, like what is an alternative investment? You know, are they risky? Are they expensive? These are really basic.
You got to educate. You got to educate. That's definitely point one. So what's point two?
Point two is it's never too late. Understanding that life happens and you could have best laid plans and things blow up in your face. I think there's this misconception that you have to start saving early. Well, that's fine. You can start saving in your 20s, but then what if you use your 401k to help buy a house? Right? What if you have some sort of health problem and you have to deal with that?
You have to tap into it for some reason. Yep.
You go through a nasty divorce. You have to give your ex-spouse everything you had.
Yeah,
now
half.
Nothing, right?
Yeah.
So it's never too late as long as you make the commitment. And so, you know, I think that's another thing is that, you know, don't look at it as, well, I didn't start early enough, so what does it matter? Well,
what I love about that point is life happens, and I really appreciate the fact that you address that, and that people need to understand that just because that happens, it shouldn't stop you from staying on your path, or maybe even trying a new path, right? And once you get new education and you're enlightened, hey, this is what you should be doing.
That's my story. I was a very financially responsible person. I mean, through most of my late 20s and 30s. I can't say it was prior to that, but through most of my 20s and 30s, I tried to be very financially responsible. I bought a house. I had good savings. I had a lot of money in my 401k. And, you know, life happened. I had to sell the house because I moved. We lost some money when we sold it. I had to empty my 401k plan to deal with, you know, some health issues for members of my family. And then I got divorced, and then I had nothing. And now I am literally starting from scratch.
Over again.
Exactly. So like, even now it's, you know, I get great satisfaction by taking $300-400 a paycheck and throwing it into my investment account and making some investments and saving some money. But the balance isn't substantial because I'm rebuilding. And
but you're doing it, Shana. That's the important part. You're doing it. The things came, the storm came, and you said, you know what? I've got to stay on my journey.
We judge people a lot.
Yeah.
And say, well, you should have, or you shouldn't do this, or, oh, why would you do that? Like, by the time you're X and you have, you know, a house and 2 kids, a dog and a white picket fence, like that's what you're supposed to have, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. And if you don't have that, there's something wrong with you. You're a bad.
Sure. That is so true. That is so true.
And don't judge people by where they are when you don't know why they're there. And if they just want to start because they didn't make the best decisions before, and maybe life didn't happen, they just didn't make the best decision, like, we should encourage them to start and not belittle them because they didn't start when you thought they should.
Or not belittle them because, as you said, life happens and obstacles hit their way. All right. So what's point number 3, Shana? This is a great conversation. What's point number 3?
I would say point number 3 is that focus on what brings you joy.
Mm.
Right? So we talked about education. We talked about it's never too late, but don't get so fixated on, oh, I have to have an emergency fund. I have to have this much, that you are preparing to prepare. Like you can't prepare to prepare. I hear this all the time. I have a friend, Jacqueline, who's on Instagram, Jacqueline Plans. And she did a great little TikTok. And in it, she said, you're preparing, if you're a constant state of preparation for your life, then you're not living.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me, because if the reason you're not taking action today is because you don't think you're ready and you feel like you need to prepare, that's like a constant.
You're missing out on a lot.
You're missing out on a lot.
Yeah.
So focus on what brings you joy. Don't stop doing those things because you're in a state of paralysis and you feel like you need to be in a constant state of preparation. Take the leap. Life is fluid. Life is about taking action. There's never the best time to do anything, but better to start doing something, but not at the expense of living your life. And
Shana, I will say this. I got to say this. We've done several of these interviews. This has been one of the most real interviews that we've done, and really peeling back a lot of the realness of life and how our finances and our life sometimes are disjointed. So thank you so much for being very open and being very real with us.
Well, my pleasure. Like nothing if not authentic.
That's the best thing. You can only be you, as they say. All right. So please do us a favor. Recap the top three, Shana's top three motivational money messages for those folks who, I like to say, as a former wholesaler years ago, tell them what you're going to tell them and tell them what you told them. So if you could recap those three first, that'll be great.
All right. First, education. Don't be afraid to educate yourself. It's half the battle. Number two, it's never too late to save or to start your financial journey and get on the right track. It doesn't, you don't have to be 20, you can be 50, it doesn't matter. Life happens. Don't let that stop you because you feel like, oh, well, it happened and now I'm too far behind. Like, that's just life. And number three is don't forget what brings you joy. So don't focus on being ready to do things at the expense of actually doing the things that bring you joy. And don't give up the things that bring you joy because you think you're supposed to be doing something. And, you know, when we're in the sense of finance, it's like, well, I can't do X because I didn't save this much money this month. Like, no, live your life. Things happen. Enjoy life. And don't worry about like sticking to like stringent rules. Focus on what brings you joy.
Amen. From the congregation. Amen. Amen. Shana, again, I want to thank you for taking a slice of your time. I know you're a very busy executive. I know you're doing things to change the world and change the face of the financial services organization. I like to say that the financial life journey is a long one, right? And whatever motivates you motivates your money. And please keep doing what you're doing. Keep shining the light for those that are in search of guidance. And as I like to say at the end of these interviews, the journey continues.